Hey guys, what is going on? Thanks so much for watching the channel. Matt Smith here as always. I appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe before we get going. Drop yourself in the comments. You know the drill. Appreciate everybody for being here. Tons to get to. It's still been a very busy week, even though, gosh, it's been over 3 weeks now that since Colorado played Oklahoma State. And look, getting back from New York, it's been a bit of a whirlwind here, even though there hasn't been any games. Awards week was crazy, and the Heisman ceremony night, the last time we spoke was the day before. It was after day one, and I wanted to give some time for everything to settle in. And first of all, fun trip out to New York. New York is overwhelming, especially staying in the middle of Times Square, just overcrowded, just so many people, but the food is amazing there. There are so many benefits to, big city life as well as drawbacks, certainly. And, being from Chicago, living downtown, I do miss that. I do miss that. So it was nice to be able to indulge in some of those luxuries that you get when you get to live in the big city, but also deal with some of the other stuff, like, cab drivers fighting at 4 o'clock in the morning to get your business and then going 75 down a side street and hitting a speed bump. That was my exit out of New York City. It was just like, okay. All right, I'm ready to be back in Colorado, and certainly nice to get back. I do miss the food, though. I woke up this morning and said to myself, man, I wish I just walked down to a diner and grab some breakfast. But, back to Colorado. Everything else is great, though, so willing to make that trade-off. And look, it was a good back to football week, really, for these guys. Bowl practices underway. We spoke to Coach Prime for the first time since after Oklahoma State on Tuesday, as well as both of the coordinators about the Heisman trip. Just to round everything out there, really cool night for Travis Hunter. And I know we've talked about this a lot, but I wanted to just share my thoughts. A really emotional night, too. Watching Travis go up there, it felt almost like the culmination of the last couple of years in Boulder, because while it was about him, it felt like just a celebration of the program in general. And certainly it was a celebration of the man he is and the talent that he is, and just the rare opportunity that we've all had to watch one of college football's all-time greats. And he handled it so well, as we knew he would. He hasn't done a ton of media. He doesn't like to do a ton of media, but his personality shines through whenever he gets up in front of a microphone. And it was a real pleasure for us to be able to talk to him and get to know him a little bit better and know more of his story from his perspective, because that's important to hear as well. And he spoke about things that were very personal in his speech, and he did it with his heart on his sleeve, and he was brave to do that, very brave to do that. And it was really cool to see how he was received. It goes down as one of the best award speeches I've ever seen, and he powered it through, man. If I were up there talking about a lot of that stuff that was so emotional and personal to me, I'd be a weepy mess. I mean, I know a lot of us out there would have been, but he powered through and did such a great job. It was very touching, just a great moment with Coach Prime, and funny moment with Lil Wayne. And my personal favorite from that night was the picture of him and Shedeur holding the Heisman Trophy together, because those two guys have meant so much to the program, and that Heisman doesn't happen without Shedeur. And Shedeur should have been up there. If this was a true meritocracy, Shedeur would have been up there, but he wasn't. He wasn't, right? Dylan Gabriel was, and congratulations to them. But if Colorado didn't have 3 losses, Shedeur would have been up there. So I was happy to see that, because those guys mean a lot, certainly to Buff Nation, and definitely to me as well, right? I'm a part of that, and getting to be around this and watching those two guys, even just for a brief period of time, mature and grow. And they are both leagues different in some ways, but also the same from the players and the people that they arrived on campus as. You can see they both come out of their shell, and at the right times, and they're both ready for their next adventures. And the overwhelming thought and takeaway that I had while we were in New York was, man, I'm going to miss this. There's a line in The Office where Andy Bernard looks at the camera in the finale and he says, I wish there was a way to know that you were in the good times while you were still actually in them. And these are the good times. These are the times we're all going to look on and remember. And I just felt very fortunate that we get one more lap around the track with these guys in San Antonio. So Very, very fun couple of days in New York. Certainly a lot of walking. I spent Saturday in Central Park walking around. That was awesome. Did way more walking than I have in a while. And that was great too. That's just one city that it doesn't matter if it's after 7 a.m. and it's before 2:30 in the morning. Just don't get in a cab. Just don't get in a car because you're not getting around. Not in Manhattan, that's for sure. So, a great trip, an unbelievable once in a lifetime experience. Um, it was a cool event. It was a cool event, and just grateful to be able to check off that box. As far as media members, we all had a good time. Brian and I went out to dinner on Friday night. Did some good stuff. Got some good Italian food. Hit some diners up. I didn't make it to a Jewish deli though. Wanted to make it to a Jewish deli, just didn't have time. And there's no good ones around Times Square. And again, it's like, well, do I want to get in a cab? Do I want to pay $100 round trip in an Uber because it felt like every time I got in an Uber, it was 50, $60. And it's like, okay, I mean, after a while, you're paying for the hotel, paying for this. It adds up, folks. It adds up when you're a one-man band. So it's like, you know what? I'll just walk. There's a perfectly good diner that's got 4.7 stars right around a corner. I'm just walking down there. And that's the beauty of living in the big city. And that was exactly what I was missing this morning when I woke up. I was just, but it's okay. You look at the mountains, it's almost 70 degrees today. It is December 20th. Look, okay. I'm blessed. I recognize that. Just maybe not with good food. So back to ball Tuesday. Very fortunate to be there for the Heisman ceremony. Travis handled it fantastically. The ceremony itself, it was okay. From a media perspective, there were a few things that I probably would have done a little bit differently, but I thought it was a great opportunity. We got to speak to Travis a ton, and again, something I'll never forget, and certainly nobody will who went. And the last part about it, the teammates that Travis, I imagine through United, obviously with that name, image, and likeness deal that he has with them, that he was able to fly his teammates out to New York, whoever wanted to come. And that moment of everybody reacting, because everybody had a part to play in that, just like Shedeur did as well in the room, and they showed it on TV, and that's cool stuff. And we talked to DJ McKinney this week about it, and he was inspired by it. He said, watching Trav walk into the room with the Heisman Trophy, why can't I be that guy next year? And that's the type of stuff that's just doesn't come around very often. And so when it does, you got to smile and acknowledge it and kind of tip your cap along the way. So very, very cool, very special trip. And because it's been because of the spotlight that the program is under, it's a must-win situation every time they take the field now. It's not the way it had been. Expectation has been created around here. So when you get a chance to sit back and almost take a breather, yeah, today is the start of the college football playoff. It sucks. I would love to see them there. You would love to see them there. They wanted to be there. We all understand. But when you get that moment amidst what feels like chaos sometimes around the program or has been, and when it's not chaos, just good busy, but busy, right? Just a full-time commitment. It's rare that you get those times to sit back. And even at the bye week, you can't really take that much of a breather and be that reflective because they had so much going on. They played must-win football all year, and that's basically college football, but especially when there's expectation behind it and you have a team capable of doing something that's great, right? And you have a team that's, a collection that's better than their individuals is what I would say with this team. And that's pretty impressive because you've got some pretty great individuals here. And that's how far they've developed as a program. So being able to sit back and reflect on things, which I think everyone got a chance to do, that's a good thing too, because then you come back to practice with the requisite appreciation, and they definitely have. That's all the coaches have talked about, how everybody's locked back in. Shedeur and Travis talked about it on, I think it was Travis's podcast, that they knew it was a breather time and then time to get locked back in. And you got 21 seniors in this class and a bunch of guys who are going to go out to San Antonio and want to make a good impression on tape because they're trying to go to the next level, and scouts will dig through every last part of it. And now, as Coach Prime has been trying to prepare these guys for, a lot of them hit the real world, football or not. Because even in football, in professional football, you have to deal with the real world. Nobody caters to your every need. Maybe when you get to the league, but even then, you got a lot of big boy business to handle. So now is about switching your mentality. Now is about thinking about what's next. And even for the guys who are returning, as you grow up, as you become a young man, there are different chapters in your life, and as you become from maybe underclassmen to upperclassmen, or maybe from red shirt to a guy who's going to be a participant, or maybe even coming into a program, there are new checkpoints to life, and I think it's very important to make sure that you're aware of those and acknowledging those and understanding what they mean, right? And where you're headed. And so it's a big time. And the fact that they have to be in San Antonio all week, all Christmas week for the Alamo Bowl, I think is actually a good thing for them, because then you don't really have a chance not to be focused. These guys have done a great job when they've been on the road for an extended period of time. They have an they have an experience doing this because of Hurricane Helene, when they had to go to Orlando early and we all had to, race out there to beat the hurricane. So they know what it's like. They know what it's like to be down there for a business trip. But Coach Prime also understands what a bowl game presents, and they need to have some fun, right? It's a business trip, but also let's get these guys out around town, and it's the last time to hang out with your boys. And a lot of this is the last time that this group of guys is ever going to be together. Because after the bowl game, everybody goes back, and then everybody starts to go their separate ways. So you have one last week to celebrate, and the way they're going to do it is by locking in, which is the way they should, because as Coach Prime said the other day, they want to finish what they started. And at the end of the day, every college football fan has been begging for teams to take bowl games that are not the playoffs seriously. That's what they're doing. And oh, by the way, you look around the country, at least that I've seen, not too many big reports on big players opting out of lesser bowl games. And that's one thing I brought up. I think it was even with Mark Johnson, and I think I even mentioned it with Brian, that this should be something we start to see maybe have an effect on the rest of the country, and it is. That they're not going to duck the smoke. They're going to finish it out, right? I mean, yeah, okay, you could get hurt in a bowl game just as easily you get hurt in draft training. That's the truth. That's this sport. Football is 100% injury rate. If you play, you will get hurt eventually. Just kind of how it goes. Now, obviously, full contact, you run a big risk, but at the same time, that's football. That's the nature of the business. That's what you signed up for. And if you love this game, that's not even in your thought process, as it isn't for them. And it's good to see that around the country, not too many guys dipping out. And look, they are trendsetters. They've done it, I mean, dating back a while now, but specifically on the national stage, when they got to Boulder and they got the biggest spotlight put on them, you see everybody else, trying to copy their sauce, right? Trying to get a little bit of what's working for them and mix it into their program, which is why, you hear about all these programs that are attacking the transfer portal and going about it the new way. Well, they started that. And it's not the only thing that they have influenced around the country, and they will continue to do so. So I love to see it, and it makes for a better bowl season for everybody involved and a much better week for everybody here, because if not, it would have been a skeleton crew headed out to San Antonio, and can't have that either. So great to hear. And, the other thing that Coach Prime brought up on or this week was that it's more than that, right? It's about being a good teammate. It's about being a good leader. He told Mark Johnson on the coaches show that he asked Shedeur to at least throw for one of the sessions in 7-on-7s when everybody goes down to the East-West Shrine game, so that his receivers can have all of his have their guy and have the chemistry down so they can show well. And he didn't blink. That's Shedeur. He's a great teammate and a great leader. That doesn't benefit him at all. All that Shedeur will need to do is just private workouts. That's all that he would really need to do. That's it. And maybe, some of the medicals at the combine. But that's it. He doesn't have to do that. But he doesn't back down from that. And that's what I love about these guys, is they're old school like that. All right. My guys need me to be there for them, just like I needed them to be there for me. They all showed up, they all sacrificed. The least he can do is go down there. But a lot of younger people, especially in today's generation, they don't understand that. They don't understand that personal sacrifice. A lot of it is attributed to how Shedeur and Shiloh certainly were raised, right? But that is a sacrifice because you don't show well down there. Maybe you turn off some scouts who don't. But we know Shedeur will show well. There's no showing poorly, especially in 7-on-7 for Shedeur Sanders. So I thought that was cool and worth mentioning. And just another example of when you hear people, and I imagine we will, all the bad draft takes are going to fly once the NFL season ends when you hear people say, well, I don't know if his antics or this team doesn't like that. And all they're talking about is the stupid watch flex. That's all they're talking about. They actually don't know what they're talking about because everybody that I've ever spoken to around Shedeur, including speaking to Shedeur for 2 years now, has ever said a bad thing about him. He's a fantastic teammate who gets it, right? Who absolutely gets every part of it. And again, as bittersweet as it is, that this will all be over, in about a week and just over a week. This chapter of Colorado football and this chapter for their family will be, closed, and the next one will open. As bittersweet as that is, I am really looking forward to what awaits them at the next level. And Pat Shurmur spoke about that this week as well. He talked about how, and I'll say one thing about these coordinators. Say what you want about these NFL guys. First of all, they've done a great job for the most part. Second of all, they care. They care. Robert Livingston, I really like Robert Livingston. What a home run hire that has been, and he loves it here. He's got 4 young kids. It's a Thunderdome at the house, the Livingston house, and he is settled down. This is a great place to raise a family. That's one thing about Colorado, which is why you actually see a lot of professional athletes end their careers here and want to stay here. That's why Peyton Manning, after only spending a couple of years in Colorado, stayed in Colorado and didn't go back to Indianapolis because it's amazing here. It's a great place to raise a family. On top of many other things, that specifically, great school system here. It's safe here, just a really good place to be. And Robert Livingston, he cares. He cares a lot, and he's an emotional guy when things really matter to him. And so there have been many different times this year where he's been on the verge of tears several different times when we've spoken to him, and I would say it's been quite frequent because this stuff really matters to him, and it is not taken for granted by him, the chance and the opportunity that he was allotted here at Colorado and the connections that he's made with some of the kids. So obviously, I don't think, and the reason I bring that up is I don't really bat an eyelash when he gets a little emotional now because that's just kind of who he is. And I love that about him, right? I mean, that's why players relate to him so much because it's obvious that he cares, he's invested, he's committed, and he's supportive. Pat Shurmur, 25-year-old hardened head coach, and I wouldn't say he's like this old grizzly guy. I'm not trying to paint that picture of him, but he's seen a lot in his career, and he's had a lot of different relationships with a lot of different players. Pat had to fight back, getting emotional talking about Shedeur. And I loved what he said. He said if some NFL team convinces themselves to draft any other quarterback first at that position, then they're taking the second best quarterback on the board, which is true. And that's a former NFL head coach. It's a 25-year NFL coach. It's a veteran guy who's seen a lot and worked with some really good quarterbacks saying that. And that's something that I've felt that way since last year. So it was really cool because it just speaks even further to the special bond that everybody has. And you saw it, the Kevin Mathis raising the fist up in the air when Travis won the Heisman, and the guys are having fun with that. But that's how much it meant to him. Right? I mean, he's a very real guy. If he's doing that, that's because that means a lot to him. And so it's just those are the subtle things that you don't see that with every team, guys. You definitely don't. And to be able to see it with this group, it's just when you know you got something special. So it's going to be a great week for them down in San Antonio, even though it is over Christmas. A lot of these guys won't be with family. They'll be with their other family, which is equally as important, and those guys have done a ton for them as well. And Coach Prime also spoke about a little bit, now that we're getting towards the end of it and signing day is official, about what he saw in Juju Lewis and why he picked Juju. And I think that's a good time and a little bit of a transition here to talk about some of these other things. And with Juju, he talked about how what he's looking for. He's looking for a winner. He's looking for a guy who's smart. He's looking for a guy who's poised, and he's looking for um, a good family dynamic. We've heard that from him dating back to last year before he came in, and I'm sure he's been talking about that for years as well. But he's seen it with Juju. Now Juju comes in younger, and one thing that we had heard behind the scenes, which never really made sense to me, if I'm being honest, which because it kind of goes against everything that Coach Prime has been about. I had heard that maybe there had been a promise made to Juju that, they weren't going to bring in another guy so he could have the job, which Coach Prime doesn't just give things out. You've got to earn that. So, but it was one of those situations where, well, to land a guy of his stature, maybe you have to make some special exceptions. No, they didn't. That's why they went in and brought in Caden Salter, the former Liberty quarterback. So now you have those two quarterbacks. And so after watching Juju the other night in the state championship game and watching a lot of his games from this senior year, look, this is a really talented thrower of the football, but he's a kid. He's a kid. He's not yet 18, right? He's 17. And that is a lot of responsibility to just dole out to somebody. And a lot of the time, he's making wide open throws for touchdowns. And certainly, now look, I want to preface everything I'm about to say with, and that's not all he's doing. He's got a great quick release. He's got a great savvy. He knows how to move around the pocket. I'm not saying that's all he is. It's just playing against lower competition because he's playing some of the best and most talented high school players in the country down there in Georgia. But in the state final game, and I think it was game 13 of the year, he broke his hand, his throwing hand. And for the last few weeks, he's been gutting it out and playing with it. The other night, it caught up to him in the state championship game. They were out to a little bit of a lead, and then they just couldn't move the football. They struggled to get it downfield. You could tell there were a couple times he tried to throw it downfield, and he must not have been able to grip the ball that well because they floated on him a little bit, and he threw a couple of picks there in the fourth quarter, and Carrollton lost, unfortunately. But that is a guy, even still, that team he was playing had a lot of D1 offers, mind you. Okay. I mean, these guys are all basically playing college ball. They had some really talented dudes. Grayson did on their defense as well. But the one thing that I thought, even with the broken hand, was okay, well, this is clearly the best team he's gone up against. This is probably the most representative of what college competition is going to look like. He may not be ready. Now, it's not fair because he had a broken hand to judge like that, but it is really good that they have another very experienced and successful option, right? A guy who's had experience winning. Caden Salter is 21-4 in his 25 career starts at Liberty. In 2023, he led a Liberty team that was, what was it, undefeated in the regular season, something like that. They had one loss in a year, and he had a hell of a season. He's was a 2,000-yard rusher in college already, a guy who could do a little bit of both. I'd be pretty surprised if we don't wind up with a scenario where he's starting week one based upon everything that I've seen so far from Juju. I think it's going to take some time, which is great. I just didn't know if that was something he was open to. Glad it is, because now he can come in, get his feet wet, and he's going to be here for bowl practices in San Antonio. A lot of these guys. Now, Coach Prime had talked about how he was going to put him on the scout team and let him run the scout team in San Antonio. He's got a broken throwing hand. I don't think they will, number one. But that probably shouldn't be the plan. I mean, let him rest up for spring ball, maybe get in the conditioning, get around the guys, be at practice, shadow Shedeur. That's what I'd have him doing. Shadow Shedeur. You may not be able to throw. I want your eyes glued, okay? Glued to two, which I'm sure he will be anyway. And I know that, every time he's been around, I'm sure he's been that way anyway. But obviously now he's part of the new incoming group that's going to have to uphold the standard that this group set. And we go back to what Cameron Silman-Craig talked about after the Oklahoma State game, where he talked about the standard. He talked about how when they arrived, it had evaporated. There was no standard here. Top down, the mindset was a losing mindset. And they came in and helped instilled a new winning culture and a new standard for what is acceptable, which is huge. But it only matters if that tradition is passed down from team to team and from player to player, which becomes harder and harder with so many new pieces when you basically have to rebuild a team every single year. And when you do lose impactful senior classes like they will this year, losing the class that Coach Prime brought in, right? that's going to have an effect. So you have to make sure that one of your points of emphasis for these younger guys is watch this week, because it's on you moving forward. When we rejoin for spring ball and for workouts and winter conditioning, you are the ones who have to uphold the standard. And that's part of the reason why we talk about it's going to be a transition period, because a lot of those guys, you don't have to do as much maybe coaching effort or coaching, coaching culture, really, when you have that leadership in the locker room. And they still will have some big pieces, don't get me wrong, but let's not gloss over the effect that the guys that they're about to lose have in the locker room as well. So you do have to do some things a little bit differently. Glad they brought in Salter. Feel much better about that quarterback competition. Would still be pretty surprised. Not going to doubt him, count him out, but would be pretty surprised based upon what I've seen and just based upon his age and what needs to happen. It's not, you rarely ever see 17-year-olds come in. I don't think it's ever happened that they come in and dominate like that. Even a guy like Khalil Tate, who ended up being like a dual threat guy and, one of the buff killers, he came in at 17 and he had some spot duty at the end of the year. Doesn't mean Juju won't play at all, but I just think that when you're dealing with somebody who's so young like that and you're still trying to keep things on the track, having that option in Salter, that's a big deal. And even Pat Shurmur brought up kind of having that bridge quarterback, and they were able to find one. I think it's a very solid option for them. And they've gone on and brought in what they did, in this freshman class, and then what they have so far in the portal. Landing Jaheim Otis out of Alabama, right? That's a huge get. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be their Wonkro replacement. On paper, he is. However, something very interesting happened over the last week in college football. Diego Pavia, who was Vanderbilt's quarterback this year, they beat Bama, and he kind of had that little, he had his 15 minutes of fame. He sued the NCAA, claiming that his 2 years spent in junior college should not count against his eligibility, and a judge ruled with him. So for now, if you played in junior college, your junior college years aren't held against your eligibility, which would have a pretty significant impact on Colorado, because there's a couple of really important players that went the JUCO route, and Chidozie Nwankwo is one of them. So I don't know. Do they petition to get him another season? Think it's a possibility. Preston Hodge, that's another name. Do they petition him? I mean, I think both those guys would have a pretty good chance at a bare minimum. Well, first of all, both of them will be in an NFL training camp if they decide to go that route. Whether they're drafted or not is a different story. Preston would be, I believe. Chidozie probably would be too. However, if you're allotted another year, man, I'd think about it. I'd really think about it if I were those two guys, and think about if they could keep those two. So who knows what ends up playing out with that, but that's a significant ruling that will have widespread impacts across college football. I don't mind it because it's a different level. I know a lot of traditionalists out there say, man, you get out of college. Life has changed since what college football was created to be, okay? Our education system is unbelievably antiquated, and that is not a political view. That is a practical view. Think about right now, unless you're an engineer, a specialized field that requires maybe extra schooling, a scientist, a mathematician, how much stuff in school did you learn that you never needed again? So much we didn't learn that so many of us could have used moving forward. And so college really isn't like that. You're not guaranteed a job after 4 years. A degree doesn't guarantee you a position. There's a lot of people out there who think going to school for 4 years guarantees you a desk job. It doesn't. Not anymore. Life is way too specialized. And so I don't really have a problem with it. I really don't. If you go the junior college route, you're not at the Power 4 level. Yeah, you're still in college. I get it. That's just my opinion. Some of you may not agree with that. And I appreciate you still listening anyway. But I mean, the larger point remains the same. Our education system was created to mass educate people, to send people off to war. That's what it was. And we still operate that way. It doesn't make any sense. A lot of things that don't make sense, but I digress and I'll get off my soapbox. So with the portal specifically, you bring in Otis, whether he's Wonkro's replacement now or not. If you think, imagine him next to Wonkwo. Okay, that'd be pretty fun. So that's a big get. Zach Atkins, the tight end, that's a big get. I want to see a couple of more tight ends brought in this program because even with more so now with Salter, you can really do a lot of that RPO stuff. So it's very important that you work your running game, the foundations. I just think back to what Kansas was able to do in Kansas State, some of those tight ends, the versatility, and what you can open up in your offense. I think trying to be more of that four wide team, I think you can do it, but you have to have a quarterback that can really stand in there and be the system like Shedeur can to effectively do it. Otherwise, you need a very strong running game, and tight ends are a very important part. So I hope they continue to bring some of those, kind of H-back like guys in the program because you need to be able to run the football, especially, God forbid it is Salter. He goes down and you got to go to Juju. You need a strong running game. The one thing I can tell you based upon watching that game against Grayson, the state title game, because I made this comment to somebody else, is that if Colorado doesn't fix their protection issues, who else is standing in there and taking the beating that Shedeur did the last 2 years? Not either of those two guys, and it's not a knock on them, but they're both slighter. They're not as big as Shedeur was, and Shedeur had heart that is not easily found in everyone else. Not saying they don't have it either, but that was Shedeur got hit many, many times. It should have knocked him out of the game, and he never went out until he got too hurt that he couldn't continue, and that was late last season. So understand that if those issues, which still happen this year, they trimmed them down. They got better in some of those areas, but a lot of that had to do with him too. If those still exist next year, and you're going to have to replace some of those positions and do things differently, if those exist, you could be in trouble. And you will. How about no hypothetical there? If those still exist, you will be in trouble. Those have to get resolved. And one thing that I talked to Coach Prime about at the end of last season, I asked him, we're sitting there post-game presser in Salt Lake City about priorities this offseason. He talked about running the ball being 1A and stopping the run being 1B. They accomplished getting and making a large jump and getting much better stopping the run. Running the ball, they're going to finish back-to-back years as the worst rushing offense in the country. You can't have that moving forward. I don't care how much you believe in Juju or Salter. Like, you have to be able to run the football effectively to continue to have success because Shedeur is, in my opinion, one of those guys that covers up for a lot. And in my opinion, he's a generational college talent. He really is. Look at what he has done with what he's had to work with. It is remarkable. And you put his total collegiate numbers up against anybody, he stands up against anyone. So you just got to make sure you plan for that, and they've taken some of those steps. I want to see a couple of backs get brought in this program. Have not seen that yet, but obviously it's still very early, and these are just things on the wish list, and they know what they're looking for now, and I trust that they'll go out and get the job done on the recruiting trail as well because they've given us no reason to think that they won't. I do wonder, though, how much of an effect Shedeur and Travis had on recruiting as far as wanting to come play with these guys. And maybe some of these older guys, upperclassmen, 1 or maybe most 2 years left, do they take a look at it and go, well, you're more of an unproven commodity because I know you don't have the best quarterback in the country this year and you don't have a generational talent outside at receiver and at corner, an All-American on both sides of the ball. So it'll be interesting to see. Now, obviously, they have a lot of things working to their advantage, and there's a new crop of players that get to go assume those roles and get to be in the spotlight themselves, and that's a very exciting venture, and you get to do that for Coach Prime. So I'm sure they'll have plenty of success, as we've already seen them have some success. Now, I just think this year, because of where NIL and the modern era of college football has gotten to without regulation, having the big check right now is really important. And Colorado, I just don't believe has like top 10 resources. I think they're probably top 30 in the country resources wise. And so you just got to recruit extra hard. There's been a first wave of guys that have gone that I imagine at positions of need, they would have probably been in on had they had the dollars and cents to bring some of these guys in. Now you just got to be a little bit smarter and pick and choose about which of the big price tags you go after. I imagine is the recruiting philosophy. And look, they're already as smart as they can be because they're putting these young men through the ringer before they allow them into the program, because it is a blessing that they are giving these kids to have access to these kinds of resources and opportunities that they're allotted here in Boulder. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the class shapes out. And certainly we won't know for a long time, not until after the spring transfer portal window, right? So, uh, yeah, I am looking forward to seeing how all of this plays out, because there's a lot to get done, and so far it's only been proven that they can handle it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else is in store here. Other things to note from this week, we got to talk to some of the seniors. And just one last note here for me on a Friday about how much I've enjoyed being able to cover some of these guys. This is a team of wonderful, wonderful young men, and I cannot wait to get out to San Antonio next week. I'm going to be there all week. I'm going to be there all week, and it'll be a fun celebration of this season and of one more opportunity. And they got a hell of a football game. So celebrate, appreciate, but lock in, because BYU is going to want to come in there and end their season beating the Heisman winner and beating the #1 overall draft pick and beating Coach Prime. And BYU plays for pride too. They're going to have a great fan base that travels well, and I expect that to be a very good game. As Coach Prime mentioned this week, he has a lot of respect for Kalani Sitake, their head coach. So do I. They do things the right way there. They've always had a tough-nosed program, and so I expect it to be great competition on Saturday night when they face off. Now, for Colorado reasons, the Broncos game was flexed to that Saturday afternoon. So the Broncos may own the day as far as like locally here in the buzz, but not for Buffs fans. And at least they don't overlap and cross over. So that's going to be really important, because after that game you'll be able to kind of end your evening there, and it'll be great to watch these guys put on the black and gold one more time. And I don't know, I know it's going to be a very emotional day for everybody involved. For everybody involved. I think we've maybe gotten through a big emotional hurdle because, as I brought up before, there's not a lot of time to stop and get reflective about what's going on when you really do have big goals and you can't afford to blink. So what's it going to be like for everybody? Because we've had that moment to stop and breathe, and now we all understand what's at stake here. It's the last time we get to see these guys. And when we see them take the field for their next game, it's going to look a whole hell of a lot different. And this is a really special, chapter to be able to celebrate. So I think it will be emotional for everybody. Certainly at the end of the game, it's going to be emotional. There's no doubt. And I'm sure at the beginning, the whole process will be. So just grateful we get one more opportunity to do it. Thanks, everybody, for watching the channel. Drop yourself in the comments, and we'll talk to you from San Antonio next week. Should have a bunch of fun stuff. If you have any recommendations for San Antonio, please let me know in the comments. I don't know what the hell to do down there. I've been looking. They got a couple cool experiences that I think we might end up trying to partake in. But outside of that, I'm open to anything and everything. So appreciate you guys. Follow me at Real Matt Smith everywhere, and we'll talk soon.